What's up, King fam? Welcome back. My name is Dennis, and this is a different kind of reaction. This one right here is about something that is very serious, not very. This is not entertainment. This is something going on in the world right now that is real life, and this right here really is opening eyes to a lot of people about toxic behavior, toxic relationships. How schemy and conniving and manipulating some people can be. This is a very heart-wrenching trial if you've watched any of this. I have watched a little bit of it, but I have not yet heard this part that Amber Heard did not have PTSD. So I want to watch, I think this is a therapist or psychologist giving testimony right here. And I want to see what she has to say about this, because this right here may be some very damning evidence or very damning testimony for Amber Heard's defense team. So let's check this out.
And actually score their responses.
As a result of applying those protocols, what did you conclude?
Ms. Heard did not have PTSD, and there were also pretty significant indications that she was grossly exaggerating symptoms of PTSD when asked about them.
How did you make that latter conclusion?
So one of the strengths of this test, as I mentioned, the important thing about any test used when you're doing an evaluation in forensics is to make sure that the person is responding accurately. And this test does that by not just asking people whether they have a symptom, but asking follow-up questions that draw out very detailed accounts of every single symptom of PTSD. And when you're really familiar with this disorder, which you need to be to administer this test, there are nuances in the way a person will describe their symptoms that have been shown repeatedly to indicate exaggeration or faking. There are also indications when somebody is clearly giving you a genuine response.
It is so crazy how deep psychology could be and plays a role in this. Like even someone who is a gifted actor or an actress, you can't beat the system. You can't beat the psychology behind it. It's crazy how deep this study goes. Yeah, let's continue on. This is not good for her defense, and judging by some of the things I've heard on some of these tapes, she really didn't have much of a defense to go on. But this right here is very crippling for her.
What, if any, symptoms of PTSD did you observe in Ms. Heard?
So there are 20 kind of core symptoms that somebody can manifest with PTSD. You don't have to have all of them. Ms. Heard initially said that she had, in the first question, you say, do you ever have this, before you get to the more nuanced follow-up questions. When I asked that first question on each item, she initially said, yes, I have that, to 19 of the 20 symptoms. That's not typical even of somebody with the most disabling form of PTSD. When we eventually sort of dialed it down, she had 3 remaining symptoms. And having symptoms of any disorder is common for all of us. Some of us struggle with sleep. Some of us get anxious. It could be several different disorders. It could just be that you have this struggle in your life. But she had 3 specific symptoms that I scored as present. Off the top of my head, I might miss one, but one was sleep disturbance. So she reported that she has frequent nightmares. Another one was that she said that she tends to have a startle response. So if she gets startled or surprised, she tends to stay in sort of a hyper startle mode for quite a while. And that's consistent with a couple of things. It can be consistent with PTSD if other criteria are met. It's also consistent with childhood complex trauma, which is something that can occur when your brain is forming. If you constantly feel unsafe, if your parents are abusive, or if they're not present, if you're neglected, you can develop certain physiological responses that can stay for a long time in your life. So I noted that seemed like a very genuine, accurate account where she stays in the state of kind of hyper arousal, has a hard time calming down if she gets surprised.
You mentioned nightmares as well.
Yes.
Did she recount for you the nature of the nightmares?
So they were vague. She indicated that she has recurrent nightmares and that she feels as though she's being held down. And there was some conflict in that account because even though that could be a PTSD symptom, it is fairly vague, but I still scored it as present. And in her initial treatment with with Dr. Bonnie Jacobs, which I believe started before she began dating Mr. Depp, she had indicated to Dr. Jacobs, according to Dr. Jacobs's notes, that she was having repetitive nightmares back then. And
Ooh, so this was something that is taking place even before her and Johnny Depp were an item. So this goes further back.
that they were related to her childhood trauma.
If you guys hear
So that
snoring in
came
the
up several
background, it's
times
the
in
dog.
notes. Dr. Jacobs
She's
kept
taking a
mentioning
nap.
that.
Thank you.
That's pretty
What is
pretty
feigning?
heavy hitting there.
Feigning is essentially faking or exaggerating symptoms that aren't present.
Does the CAPS-5 control for that?
It doesn't necessarily control for it, it can expose it by
And
drawing out
how does that work?
because you're not just simply handing the person a checklist that says, here are all the symptoms of PTSD, why don't just check off the ones you have, which clearly if you're trying to look like you have PTSD, you would just check them all.
Yeah.
The CAPS-5, because it requires them to describe in detail how they experience the symptom, where it shows up, what it looks like, what sort of examples they can give you, how many times it's happened in the last couple of weeks, how many times it's happened in the last month.
Yeah, you can't just check little squares on a sheet. You have to give some type of thorough answer to this. Like it has to have some substance to it. It can't just be a check mark because it has to have something in depth there. So yeah, I see where they're drawing the conclusion that she just checked 19 of 20 boxes and thought that was it. And no, that's just simply not how that story goes.
What it looks like, what sort of examples they can give you, how many times it's happened in the last couple of weeks, how many times it's happened in the last month. By the end of each symptom, you've gotten a very good picture of a couple things. One, does it meet the definition of the symptom? Are they getting it right? Is this actually the symptom, or are they kind of confusing this with something else? Number two, are they giving you very vague accounts? Are they giving you kind of a stereotyped idea of what the symptom is based on media or movies or something that actually is completely different from genuine experiences of this symptom?
Exactly, being able to
giving
act.
you a very genuine, heartfelt, sometimes minimizing, but it's ticking all the boxes. Their mannerisms while they're describing it, the actual very specific, very nuanced, symbolic ways they're describing it. A lot of times it smells, it sounds, that all appears in genuine accounts, and it's something that people really get wrong when they're feigning.
In addition to your conclusion that Ms. Heard does not have PTSD, did you make a conclusion with respect to her symptoms?
Yes, actually I did. So, just because somebody doesn't have PTSD doesn't mean that they weren't harmed psychologically by whatever is being alleged in this.
So I'm glad that he asked this question, and I'm glad she's about to get a chance to answer it. That way, instead of just kind of shooting down how Amber Heard feels or her perception of how things were, we're actually going to get some kind of idea of what was really going on, what is really going on with Amber Heard. So yeah, let's continue letting and I'm not sure, I don't know her name, but let's continue letting her answer this part of the question, because I'm really intrigued by this to see what she says is going on versus what is not going on.
In this case, Ms. Heard is alleging that she was psychologically harmed and that she suffered PTSD because of abuse that she alleges occurred by Mr. Depp. So the MMPI too is helpful because it shows you kind of everything, any other symptoms. And then in Ms. Heard's own self-report and her prior treatment records, I knew that she had reported to me that she had had some other symptoms. So now what becomes really important is determining, and let me clarify one thing here, not so much a diagnosis, but did she start to experience symptoms during the relationship and after? Did they worsen after? Or could these types of symptoms or reports be explained by other factors? A, by feigning, B, by pre-existing conditions, or C, by other stressful life events that might have occurred. So the main symptoms that I was looking at didn't meet criteria for PTSD, right? There was also, substantial evidence of this sort of emotional dysregulation, emotional disorganization, the shallowness, the dramatic affect. Now, when you have a lot of childhood trauma, you can actually have some similar type presentation in adulthood. There are some differences though, but also that's not something that would have occurred after this relationship. So now I was looking at, are there indications that these types of things that she's described, this transient anxiety, the issues with sleep, were these there prior? And sure enough, Ms. Heard, in her own self-report, stated to me that when she first got to LA, she was seeking treatment for, in her words, blanket anxiety and depression.
Wow.
She also reported that she was taking medications. In general, none of them were helpful. That's actually very typical of borderline personality disorder. Medications typically aren't very helpful for somebody.
What did she say that's typical for borderline? What did she say?
She was taking medications. In general, none of them were helpful. That's actually very typical of borderline personality disorder.
Borderline personality disorder.
Medications typically aren't very helpful for somebody with the disorder. They really need an intensive, lifelong type of therapy, which is not necessarily as relevant to this. But interestingly also, people with borderline personality disorder often respond really positively to stimulant medications that are given for ADD or ADHD. And in one of Nurse Filati's notes, she reported that Ms. Heard told her that none of the medications were working for her except for one Provigil, which is often prescribed as stimulant medication. And I just thought that was interesting and sort of consistent with more of these lifelong personality disorders that aren't necessarily caused by a harm by any allegations, but have been there and will remain there typically. The other issue, so the anxiety she had already...
So hold on for a second. I want to go back and listen to what she said right here. I had to get up and answer the door.
Lifelong personality disorders that aren't necessarily caused by a harm by any allegation.
Let's go back to this part about lifelong personality disorders.
And I just thought that was interesting and sort of consistent with more of these lifelong personality disorders that aren't necessarily caused by a harm by any allegations, but have been there and will remain there typically.
Interesting.
The other issue, so the anxiety, she had already indicated that had been there prior, but the form of the anxiety. So looking at Dr. Hughes's testing and then also looking at the scores on the MMPI, when you look at all these little combinations of the scores, you can actually learn a lot about, is the anxiety related to an event, or is this more a person who tends to be an anxious person regardless of what's going on in their life? And somebody might describe them as a worrywart. And the scores, the little combination of scores that she obtained actually indicated that it was the latter, that her anxiety tends to be separate from events and more just kind of a constant, and it comes and goes, but it's more of a trait.
I have no further questions for this witness.
All right. Maybe why don't we go ahead and, Ms. Brewer, go ahead and have our lunch break. It might be a good idea to break it up there. Okay, I know. I can see you jumping up. All right.
Wow. So from what we've learned in this clip is that according to this psychologist, is what I'm presuming just testified. If you guys hear all the stuff going on in the background, the baby girl is now awake. She's no longer snoring because mommy is now home and she's drinking some water. But apparently what we've learned here is that Amber Heard is not showing any symptoms of PTSD from the relationship with Johnny Depp, that she has exhibited these patterns of anxiety and horrific nightmares, not being able to sleep, just having a lot of these issues prior to that relationship. Now, I don't know about her childhood, because this lady here was talking a lot about childhood issues. So I don't know what Amber Heard's childhood is, but maybe some of these things have stimulated from issues during her childhood, or maybe and she's also saying that maybe these things are just character, personality traits that she has. And she even said that she may have borderline personality disorder. That is going to, that's this testimony here, unless the cross-examination, which I don't know if she's been cross-examined yet, unless the cross-examination can bring up some red flags or throw some question marks into this testimony, this is gonna be very crippling to Amber Heard's defense. So her lawyers are gonna have to really pony up on this, because this is pretty concrete evidence of just having an issue and not developing an issue because of the relationship. But anyway, leave your comments down below. Weigh in on what you think about all of this right now. I do know one thing, that this trial and a lot of what's going on, this is eye-opening for toxic behavior, toxic relationships, personalities. This is a big case of two people that were not meant to be together, that probably should have never been together. And there's been a lot of pain and a lot of heartache, hurt, mistrust, manipulation, and a lot of craziness that happened because of this relationship. So post your comments down below, and I will talk to you guys on the next one.